And it's time that this Congress acts and passes this balanced budget amendment. We've been talking about it for years, and we have that opportunity today, and I thank the gentleman for bringing it forth, and I can't tell you that I wish I could vote for it more than once today. But we must pass this today, and I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 4 minutes to the distinguished whip, the gentleman from Maryland.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from New York for yielding. I spoke yesterday on this issue. My good friend, Mr. Goodlatte, and I have talked a number of times about this. In 1995, as I said yesterday, I voted for an amendment very similar to this, almost exactly alike. And I had a confidence at that point in time that in an emergency, 3/5 of us would come together and vote to do that which the country needed to keep it stable and safe. Regrettably, over the 16 years, I have lost that confidence. I've lost that confidence this year, where, frankly, on the majority side of the aisle, we would not have passed a CR to keep the government open once. We wouldn't have passed it a second time. And very frankly, had we had to rely on the votes solely of the majority side, as we have in the past on my side, we would have defaulted on our debt. That is not a good context in which to adopt an amendment that puts the country at risk if 3/5 are not available to act in an emergency. As a result, I will not vote for this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. We are engaged at this very day in an effort to try to come to agreement on how we balance the budget. And very frankly, we only need 51%. And 51% is not there. But we have balanced the budget, and we balanced it without an amendment. We balanced it in 1998, 99, 2000, and 2001. And my Republican colleagues rightfully say, well, we offered those budgets. Yes, they did. But I will tell you, I have no doubt, not a single doubt, that if the surpluses that were created by those budgets had been available in 1998 and Bill Clinton had not said save Social Security first, that what we would have done is cut revenues deeply and had deficits during those 4 years. Now, you may disagree, but I have no doubt, based upon the philosophy that I have heard since 1981 from my Republican friends, that that would have been the case. I said yesterday that what we need is not a balanced budget amendment. What we need is a balanced budget. How do we get to a balanced budget? I don't know his name, and I apologize for that, but my friend who was the county commissioner, Mr. Latta. Mr. Latta pointed out he was a county commissioner. Now, I'll bet as county commissioner he probably had to pay for what he bought. And he gave the analogy, if you got X coming in, and you got, that's what you spend, not X plus Y. The fact of the matter is, his party has spent X plus Y plus Z plus A plus B plus C, and has run a deficit for every single year they had the presidency during the last 30 years I've been in the Congress, without fail. Now, what happened to bring us a balanced budget? First of all, we had two parties responsible. I don't think we could have done it with just one party, my party or your party. We had two parties responsible, and we constrained one another. And then we had an extraordinary growth in our economy. That's what brought us a balanced budget. But we also adopted in 1990, again in 1993, and in 1997. And I tell my good friend, the sponsor of this, sometimes he voted for PAYGO and sometimes he did not. And your party abandoned the principle of paying for what you bought in 2001. May I have one additional minute?
The gentleman is yielded an additional minute.
And as a result of abandoning that pay-go responsibility, you could cut revenues very deeply and not pay for it. Not cut spending. It takes no courage, I suggest to my friends, to cut taxes. None whatsoever. Everybody's happy. Paying for bills is a lot tougher. Requires a lot more courage, a lot more responsibility. But you jettisoned statutory pay-go in the 2000s, and you went on a spending binge. And not only did you blow a hole in the deficit, but you also blew a hole in the economy. And we saw the worst job creation of any administration since Herbert Hoover, because the economy rightfully was not confident that we would manage our finances correctly. What we need, ladies and gentlemen, in this House is a balanced budget, not a balanced budget amendment. Let us summon the courage, the will, and the ability to work together immediately in this committee, this select committee on deficit reduction, but let us do it day after day after day. And when the issues come before you, have the courage to either vote against spending or vote for the revenues to pay for what all of us have wanted to buy. And I thank the gentlelady for the tolerance, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair would ask members to avoid references in the second person. The gentleman from Virginia.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself a minute to respond to the distinguished minority whip and to point out this chart. The gentleman is quite right when he talks about profligacy when there has been Republican Congresses, although I would point out to the gentleman that when we were in the majority and we had President Bill Clinton and we had those 4 balanced budgets, he voted for 1 but not 3 others of them, but we did not cut taxes then. Taxes were cut after the attack on this country, September 11, 2001, to stimulate the economy. Now, we got roundly criticized for the deficits that ran up during that time, and this chart shows that in 2004, we had, I will in a minute.
Because the gentleman's not accurate on that.
In 2004, we had a $400 billion deficit. It was the highest deficit in American history, and it was part of the reason why we lost our majority later on. And in 2007, as the deficit stepped down each of the interceding years, in 2007 the gentleman became the majority leader and the gentlewoman from California became the Speaker of the House. And look what happened to our deficits ever since. The Congress writes budgets, the Congress doesn't balance budgets. Both parties are to blame. In the last 50 years, 6 balanced budgets in 50 years, 37 of those years Democrats, they only balanced it twice. This is a bipartisan balanced budget amendment that the gentleman voted for once before. He should join us today and set the future on a different track.
The gentleman's time has expired.
The gentleman, I tell you, has no time to yield.
I don't. I've got all these people.
You gotta have one.
Mr. Speaker.
I'm from New York.
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds?
Yes.
I yield 30 seconds to the distinguished whip.
The gentleman's chart
The gentleman
is
from
very
Maryland is
interesting.
recognized for 30 seconds.
And he says about voting for budgets. I didn't agree with some of the priorities in your budget. That's accurate. And he's correct. We didn't cut taxes. But he's incorrect as to when you cut taxes. You cut taxes in April, months before 9/11. And you gave away a lot of money and you didn't pay for it. You didn't cut spending in order to pay for it in your budgets that you offered. Furthermore, what the gentleman doesn't point out is in 1993, to a person, you voted against a program which was designed to pay our bills. To a person. And you said it would destroy the economy. We have the best economy and the largest budget surpluses you've had, and an administration is the only administration in your lifetime that ended its 96 months.
The gentleman's time
has
expired.
Bill Clinton. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this point, I am delighted to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton, the former chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
I'd ask unanimous consent, revise and extend.
Without objection.
And I thank the gentlelady from Alabama for her chairmanship of this historic debate, and I thank the gentleman from Virginia for his leadership and his willingness to yield me time. Madam Speaker, in 1985, in January, I held up my right hand, held my 2-year-old daughter in my left hand, standing right out here in front of the podium, took the oath to be the congressman of the 6th Congressional District of Texas. As soon as I was sworn in, I signed my first bill and put it right over there in the hopper, the tax limitation balanced budget amendment. The deficit, the total federal debt that year was around, the total public debt was less than $5 trillion. In January of 1995, I took the oath of office and then led the debate on the Contract with America balanced budget amendment. We actually had 2 votes that day, one on the tax limitation balanced budget amendment, which got about 260-something votes, and then we came back and voted on a balanced budget amendment without the tax limitation provision, and it passed and went to the Senate. The public debt that day was a little under $8 trillion. Well, today, the public debt is $15 trillion, $10 trillion more than in January of 1985, and $8 trillion or $7 trillion more than in January of 1995. How many years do we have to stand here and bemoan the fact that we need more courage or more this or more that, and then pile up more public debt? The annual deficit this year, the deficit in 1 year is more than the total federal budget was in 1985. The total budget. Now, I want to thank Mr. Goodlatte for bringing this bill forward. I want to thank the Republican leadership for putting it on the floor. We owe $15 trillion, Madam Speaker, and we're going to borrow another $1.5 trillion. Let's stop the madness. Let's vote for this amendment and send it to the Senate.
Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I yield. I'm sorry. I yield. I ask that the gentleman be granted time for unanimous consent statement. Be recognized for unanimous consent statement.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a unanimous consent request to submit the following 2 documents into the record. One is from the International Association of Firefighters, the other from the AARP, both of which express their opposition to this ill-founded measure before us, House Resolution 2.
Without objection, the request is granted. Gentleman from New York.
I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Massachusetts.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 30 seconds.
We do not need a constitutional amendment. We need a super committee congressional agreement now. To the Republicans, do it now. Call President Obama now. Tell him tax breaks for the billionaires on the table. Tell him defense spending on the table. Tell him tax breaks for oil companies on the table. The President says he'll put the social programs on the table. You don't have to go back 200 years to amend the Constitution. You just have to next week, next Wednesday, say, we want to do it now. We who are here will do it now. We will balance the budget by putting all of our programs on the table. Do it now. Do it now, Republicans. Don't pretend and hide behind a constitutional amendment when you can do it now. You can be the founding fathers of a balanced budget in 2011. Thank you.
Gentleman from Virginia.
Noting that the Republicans on the super committee have put a proposal on the table and Democrats have not, I now yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Manzullo, a member of the Financial Services Committee.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for a minute and a half.
Madam Speaker, there are over 10,000 federal programs and counting. No one really quite knows how many there are. I do most of my work in Congress on manufacturing, and for 12 years I've been working on a chart to identify every agency, every bureau that is involved somehow in manufacturing. And it continues to grow and grow and grow. My objective was to find a way with a common portal to be able to access via the internet exactly what's going on. But it's impossible. And that's the problem with this government. People run to Congress and say, I've got a program for this and for that. Well, you know what? It's time to start eliminating programs around here. It's time to just keep those programs that are absolutely necessary. And the best way to do that is to have the fiscal restraint imposed by a balanced budget amendment. No longer is it a matter of going to the back room and simply printing money to cover this program or that program, but we need to come to the realization that Washington doesn't have the answer for everything. And the best way to cut back on these 10,000 programs is to have the discipline of a balanced budget amendment so that the members of the House and the members of the Senate can realize you really can't spend more than what you take in.
Clerk. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia.
Madam Speaker, how much time is remaining on this item?
The gentleman from Virginia has 4 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from New York, 2 3/4.
Mr. Speaker, at this time it's my pleasure to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Womack, who's a member of the Appropriations Committee.
The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today's payday. It's Friday. For a lot of people, it's payday. They're going to get a check from their employer if they're lucky enough to have a job. And I'm sure for most of them, before ever cashing that check, they know exactly where it's going. These people have likely already come to the realization that there are a lot more needs, a lot more things they'd like to have or do, but there's just so much money. I find it incredible that my friends on the other side of the aisle believe this federal government should not have to go through the same process of discerning between what they want and what they need and what they can afford, like the rest of America. In the 10+ months I've been here, I consider this vote the most important vote I will have cast, because it's the vote that has the most impact on the future of my grandson. It is sad that Congress does not have the discipline to live within its means, and I strongly believe the only way to constrain an undisciplined Congress is to enshrine its obligation in the Constitution. An overwhelming majority of Americans believe that the balanced budget amendment as proposed today is the right way forward for America. I thank my friend Mr. Goodlatte for his leadership on the issue, and I urge its passing, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York.
I'll reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Mulvaney, who is a member of the House Budget Committee.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've enjoyed sitting here and listening to the arguments against this amendment. They range from the bizarre to the completely incredible. We've heard that it's not 1985. I wish that it were, and that the deficit were only $5 trillion. Imagine what the world would have been like if we could accomplish this 15 years ago. I've heard that we don't need this amendment to do our job against a backdrop of only being able to do it 4 times in the last 50 years. That argument simply does not pass the laugh test. I heard now, just a few moments ago, from the Honorable Minority Leader that this was not the right time to pass this amendment because somehow this body was too partisan to pass a bill, to pass an amendment to the Constitution that would take partisanship out of the equation and force us to balance the budget. These are all extraordinarily weak arguments, Madam Speaker, and they are weak because they do not go to the heart of the matter of why you'd be against this amendment. There's only one reason to be against this amendment. The only true argument against this amendment is that you want to continue to spend money that we don't have. And there are people in this chamber who believe that is the way that they keep their jobs. That if we continue to run up debt, that we continue to spend money we don't have, that somehow back in their district it will encourage their voters to send them back to this chamber. Madam Chairwoman, I believe there are more important things than our jobs. There are more important things than simply remaining a member of Congress. More so than any amendment, any bill that we will take up this year, this amendment is the opportunity that we have to send the message to the people back home that we are willing to do what is right, that we're willing to stand up for them, and to give them the opportunity to change the Constitution of the United States in a way that they see fit. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York.
Reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia.
Madam Speaker, we have only one speaker remaining, so we would reserve as well.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Would the gentleman, you have only the closer? All right, then I'll yield myself the balance of our time.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, since 1995, when this amendment was last on the floor, we proved we could balance the budget without a balanced budget amendment. But the balanced budget is not the highest goal. The highest goal is prosperity, a full employment economy, and that requires a balanced budget over the business cycle. It requires that in good times we balance the budget and pay down, we have a surplus and pay down the deficit, but that in recession you should have a deficit to spur the economy. You should spend money to spur the economy and get out of the recession. To try to balance the budget by cutting spending during a recession is to increase unemployment, is to guarantee that every recession becomes a depression. Just look at what's happening in Germany, which is in pretty good shape, until they elected a government that enacted austerity to try to balance the budget. Their economy is tanking. The same thing in Great Britain. The second point I want to make is that when we talk about balanced budgets in the states, they have a separate budget for operating expenses and for capital budgets. Here, this balanced budget amendment would say we should never borrow money for anything. The federal government should never borrow money. That's insanity economically. It would mean we have no money for our bridges, roads, highways, etc. Third, this amendment would say if we couldn't reach agreement, if we didn't pass the balanced budget, the courts would have to decide whether to increase taxes, and if so, which taxes, or cut programs, and in such case, which programs. We should not be giving to the courts such power to make such decisions. Finally, Social Security, Medicare, these are not debts. They're obligations of the federal government. A balanced budget amendment would put them would put them at risk. We would have to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, cut all these things if we passed the balanced budget amendment, and if we were unwilling, as our colleagues on the other side are, to raise taxes on the rich. And the fact is, taxes on the rich are much less than they've ever been, which is the basic causes of the deficits that we're running now. The balanced budget amendment would not balance the budget. We would still have the stalemate between Republicans who want no taxes on the rich and draconian cuts on lower and middle income programs, and those on our side of the aisle who disagree on that. If you can't reach agreement on those things now in the Super Committee, what makes you think you would reach agreement just because you had a requirement on the books that said you should? It would end up in court. The balanced budget amendment is simply a sop to be able to say we're doing something about a balanced budget when we're in fact unwilling to make the tough decisions that could in fact balance the budget. We showed during the Clinton administration that those decisions could be made. And if we really want to balance the budget, we have to undo most of the Bush tax cuts. We have to stop voting for wars that we don't pay for. And we have to really balance the budget, not pass an amendment. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Virginia.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself the balance of the time.
The gentleman is
Madam Speaker,
recognized.
the gentleman from New York and I agree on one thing. Prosperity is the goal. And this is not a pathway to prosperity. 50 years, 6 balanced budgets is a pathway that has led to a $15 trillion debt that we have right now. That's not prosperity. The largest debtor nation on earth is not prosperity. $50,000 per American citizen in debt is not prosperity. But the $60 trillion in future obligations that we have yielding this result is definitely not prosperity for our children and grandchildren. That is why we need the discipline that a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution provides. That is why this is a bipartisan vote. That is why dozens of Democrats will join us today in enshrining in our Constitution something that will require that future Congresses balance the budget. I urge my colleagues to join us in this matter, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The Chair would like to ask members to not pass between the Chair and the member being recognized. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Joint Resolution 2 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. No! In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the negative, the rules are suspended. The rules are not suspended.
Madam Speaker,
Virginia?
on that I ask for a recorded vote.
I ask for the yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Member will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, this is a 15-minute vote on the motion to suspend the rules. Will be followed by a 5-minute vote on adoption of House Resolution 470. This is a 15-minute vote.
Wrapping up over 5 hours of debate over 2 days, for the first time in 15 years, the U.S. House is voting on a balanced budget amendment. This is an amendment that would require the government to operate under a balanced budget each year and not run any deficits unless 3/5 of the whole number of each chamber, the House and Senate, votes to incur a budget deficit. This is a 15-minute vote, and as you're watching, a couple of observations. David Hawkins, who reports for Congressional Quarterly, says that the vote will fall at least 40 votes short of the two-thirds majority required because no more than 20 Democrats will support it. CQ also writes that in order for the proposal to take effect, both the House and the Senate will have to adopt the resolution with the two-thirds majority, and then 38 of the states would have to ratify it. This is an amendment vote, by the way, that was part of the deal, the debt agreement deal that was signed in August. So the House is voting here, and the Senate, before the end of the year, will get their chance to vote on the balanced budget amendment. Meanwhile, the next vote will be a rule vote for a bill dealing with workplace unionization. That will be a 5-minute vote. This is a 15-minute vote. Also on Capitol Hill today, the Joint Deficit Reduction Committee, the so-called Super Committee. There have been meetings going on and off throughout the Capitol. And Politico reports that with its deadline just a few days away, Jeb Hensarling, representative from Texas and the co-chair of the Super Committee, told reporters that members of the deficit-cutting panel will continue to negotiate through the weekend if they can't come to an agreement today to cut $1.2 trillion from federal spending. That's from Politico. So 15-minute vote here on the House floor. This is the balanced budget amendment. And the House is working its way through a 15-minute vote on a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. The last time they voted on the balanced budget amendment, it passed in the House in January of 1992, and the vote there in 1995 was 300 to 132. The Associated Press reports this afternoon that if all 434 active members of Congress voted and all 242 Republicans supported the amendment, it would still require 48 Democratic votes to reach the 290 needed for a two-thirds majority. But as you can see on your screen there are already three Republicans against the bill and 16 Democrats in favor of it. Our Capitol Hill producer, Annie Ten, reports and tweets that the House, the votes so far, the two of the Republican votes voting no are David Dreyer, who expressed that yesterday on the floor, and also Paul Ryan of Wisconsin. So about 100 members left to vote, and the clock has obviously run down. This is a 15-minute vote. One more 5-minute vote will follow this, and that will wrap up legislative work for the House this week, and then they are out for the Thanksgiving recess.
On this vote, the yeas are 200 and...
Ms. Clark of New York. Ms. Clark of New York votes no. Mr. Cicilline. Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall voted aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 261, the nays...
Mr. Clyburn. Mr. Clyburn voted no.
On this vote, the yeas are 261, the nays 165. Two-thirds not being in the affirmative, the rules are not suspended and the joint resolution is not passed. The unfinished business is the vote on adoption of House Resolution 470, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Calendar Number 93, House Resolution 470, resolution providing for consideration of the bill H.R. 3094 to amend the National Labor Relations Act with respect to representation hearings and the timing of elections of labor organizations under that act.
The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
So for the first time in 15 years, the House votes on a balanced budget amendment. This time it fails. The vote was 261 to 165. They needed two-thirds of the chamber. 4 Republicans voted against the balanced budget amendment: David Dreyer, Paul Ryan, Louis Gohmert, and Justin Amash. Chad Pergram, who's a producer with Fox covering the Hill, says that Paul Ryan's explanation for the no vote was, quote, "I'm concerned that this version will lead to a much bigger government fueled by more taxes." So the final vote, 261 to 165. Over 20 Democrats voted in favor of the balanced budget amendment. News reports ahead of the vote had said that many of those Democratic members would have been from the moderate Blue Dog Democrat caucus. So this is the last vote on the floor. This is the vote on the rule for a bill dealing with workplace unionization. It would provide for an hour of general debate and 10 amendments to be considered, but the House won't do that today. They will do that when they return after Thanksgiving. But for a preview of that general debate, we spoke to a Capitol Hill reporter earlier today. Pete Kasperowicz writes the Hill's Floor Action blog. Why are House Republicans bringing up another bill dealing with the National Labor Relations Board?
Well, for Republicans, the National Labor Relations Board is another thorn in their side. They've said all year that the most Congress can do is create an environment that helps job creation, and they think the NLRB rules, a couple of different rules, are stymieing that. And so this bill would try to preempt a rule that the NLRB has put out that tries to speed up union elections. I think is part and parcel of what they're trying to do this year is to create that better environment.
How much support is there for the bill, and where is it coming from?
It comes from John Klein, the chairman of the Education and Workforce Committee. The Republicans, this is in some ways a classic bill this year. The Republicans love it. They think it's at least in some vague way, a job creation bill. Democrats hate it, and it will likely pass on a partisan basis and then probably go nowhere in the Senate.
Has the NLRB itself said anything about this, the bill that's going to make its way through Congress?
I haven't heard anything from the NLRB, no.
There's been a lot of discussion in the early rule debate on this that Democrats made the point that it was another anti-union bill from Republicans. Has there been a series of bills on this subject?
What the Republicans don't like is, again, going back to a few of the other NLRB rules that come out, one of them that drives them crazy is the one that requires people to put a poster up citing worker rights, the rights that employees have in a workplace. That's going to take effect next year. It's been delayed. There's rules like that Republicans have said are tipping the NLRB from what's supposed to be a referee, an impartial referee, into something that's clearly siding with the employees. And again, they think this hurts the job creation environment. Well,
the House is doing just the rule debate and vote today. Any indication on when they'll take up the bill itself after Thanksgiving?
That's all I would know is sometime after Thanksgiving passing the rule today primes them to set that up, and they should be able to do it pretty quickly when they get back. There's only four or five amendments to the bill made in order, and they're all from Democrats that would seek to limit the impact of the bill on companies. So they should be able to do it pretty quickly once they get back.
Pete Kasperowicz writes the Hill's Floor Action blog, and you can follow that at thehill.com. Thanks for the update.
Sure.
And to vote on the rule for that bill right now. This will be the last recorded vote of the day, of the week, and ahead of the Thanksgiving recess for the House, so they'll take up that workplace unionization bill. Should the rule pass here, they'll take it up when they return after Thanksgiving. Just ahead of this vote, the House defeated or failed to get the two-thirds necessary to pass the balanced budget amendment. The vote there was 261 to 165. The last time it came up for a vote in January of 1995, the amendment passed. The vote there was 300 to 132. Martin Cady of Politico tweets that the balanced budget amendment went down with only 25 Democrats saying yes. He said that was well short of the 1995 Democratic support of 70 members.
On this vote, the yeas are 239 and the nays are 167. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purposes does the gentlelady from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, ask permission to address the House.
The gentlelady will suspend. The House will come to order. The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On roll call, number 857, I was unavoidably detained, and had I been present...
This is not in order. Will the members please take your conversations off the floor? The gentlelady is recognized.
Okay. Madam Speaker, on roll call number 857, I was unavoidably detained. Had I been present, I would have voted no. I yield
Without
back.
objection, the gentlelady's statement will appear in the record.
Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, November 22nd, 2011. When the House adjourns on that day, it adjourn to meet at 1 p.m. on Friday, November 25th, the year 2011. And when the House adjourns on that day, it adjourn to meet at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, November 29th, 2011.
Without objection, so ordered.
Madam Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to take from the Speaker's table the bill H.R. 3321 with Senate amendments thereto, to that end that the House concur with the Senate amendment.